Hey, how's it going? And today I just wanted to talk a little bit about the type macro in the verse programming language. And if you're confused about it, it's completely understandable. One of the reasons it's confusing is in the documentation itself, some of the examples don't seem to work and their explanations don't really seem to line up with one another. So it is very confusing, especially for a beginner. So I hope to just shed a little light on it. Let's just go in here and look at what it says about a type macro. It says a type macro. The type macro allows you to get the expression, the type of an expression. It can be used anywhere a type can be used. So a type here, type, is not a type, like a data type. It's a macro. And I can prove that to you, and you can prove it to yourself, is just copy this code and put it into Visual Studio. Copied it exactly. Actually, not exactly. I was trying to get rid of an error, so this would be exactly here. So this foo is just a function that has no input parameters but returns an integer of 0. That's all this is. And then here, bar, it has that as its input and it returns this x. So you'll notice here that they have the type right here, right? So if type were a type, you would think I could just go in and replace it with a different kind of type. So what if I come in here and I put an int, an integer type in there? Well, we're going to get an error, and the error message is int is not a macro. If we put a macro in there, that error should go away, right? So we'll put in type, and look, the error goes away. So int is not a macro, type is a macro. Type is not a type. So here's what's confusing in the documentation. You come in here and you read about these implicit type arguments. And the reason I'm getting into this is that I'm getting into some code on some of the game examples where these kind of function declarations are coming up. And so I'm trying to understand it, and I'm going to the documentation, but the documentation isn't really making that much sense either. Implicit type arguments. Implicit type arguments for functions are introduced using the where keyword. For example, given a function return item, which simply takes a parameter and returns it. Okay, that makes sense. So here you get the sense that type is functioning as a type, but is it? But is it really a type? Here, t, just the letter t, is an implicit type parameter of function return item, which takes an argument, here's the confusing part, which takes an argument of type, and immediately returns it. The type of t restricts what type of item we can pass to this function. Is this a true statement? The type of t restricts what type of item we can pass to it. In other words, by declaring this type, using this type, as they're calling it, type, which is really a quote-unquote macro, by using this type, right, it's supposed to restrict the parameter we can pass to it. So it's not just going to accept anything because we're using this type, right? But let's keep reading. It says it's going to restrict what type of item we can pass to this function. Listen to this next statement. In this case, since t is of type, we can call return item with any type. How does that make any sense? If type t restricts what type of item we can pass to it, and type can be called with any type, how is that restricting it? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't sound like type is restricting anything. It sounds like type is letting everybody in. It's like a bad bouncer at a bar. It's letting everybody in. It's not... Now, this last sentence, I think, is true. The reason to use implicit parametric types with functions is it allows you to write code that works regardless of the type passed to it. So, in other words, if we come into the code here again, I don't get any errors when I write that. There's no errors here. And basically, you can call this function with any parameter coming in, whether it's an int, a float, a string, it doesn't matter. It'll take anything in. And here it's returning whatever it gets back in. So it appears that this type functions, it functions as a function declaration apparently, but that's about the only place that I can seem to be able to use this without getting some kind of error. And look down here, we get an error, and you can copy and copy this code yourself straight out of the documentation. So like if you go in here and you just copy this code, exactly, just grab it and just pop it into Visual Studio. If you come here, what'll happen is you're going to get this error. And the error says, type does not yet support sub-expressions other than function declarations and where clauses. So I think that's true. In other words, the only place that type seems to work is in a function declaration like this, when you're trying to define a function. And what does this function do? Well, it takes in anything and gives back what it was given. So I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what all of this means. But to me, it seems like there's still some things that need to be properly implemented and lined up as a function declaration. But I'm not sure about using it in any other capacity. I haven't tried using it in this example that they give here, which I don't feel like this is a very good example either. So anyway, that's all I had for today. I hope I didn't confuse things more. But anyway, take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.